All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the first event for the 2020-2021 season of SFTech4Good. This is with the team from Strava Metro. I'm really excited to learn about Strava Metro, what they're working on, and how that applies through the lens of race, social equity, and how they're processing the data. Then we're going to have a Q&A. So feel free to type your questions into the chat. And then we're going to have a breakout. There's 4 questions at the end, and I'll put you into breakout rooms with someone from Strava, and that part won't be recorded. I am recording this part now, but you can talk, help, brainstorm with each other and talk about Strava Metro through the lens of those questions. So first, I want to talk about SFTech4Good. I've been working on SFTech4Good. It's a passion project of mine. I don't get paid to do it, but I really do think that having these conversations about technology and how it's being used for social impact and social change is really important. So you can see my screen here. This is the website, SFTech4Good. There's a big yellow mailing list button in the middle if you're not on the mailing list. I send a newsletter out at a minimum once a month to update everyone on the events that I've got coming out, but also other events happening in the tech and social impact space. And if you want to learn more, there's all types of tabs, and one of the tabs is events. And when you click that tab, it leads you to this webpage. This is kind of the mothership, the OG location of SFTech4Good. It's on meetup.com. It's been on meetup.com for a very long time, even before I was, I guess, in the driver's seat, because it is formed or sponsored by a nonprofit. TechSoup.org is based in San Francisco, and they basically provide, their mission is to provide tech resources to nonprofits and libraries. So someone within their organization years ago, I was living abroad at the time, so this predates me, decided that it would be really a good idea to form these groups, and the San Francisco group is the first group, but there are a ton of them, and they're under the umbrella of this project called Net Squared. So it's a Tech4Good network, and if you go to netsquared.org, you can learn all about it. I know I'm going quickly through this stuff, but what I'll do is I'll put just a quick slide together and send that out along with the slides from the Strava team, so that if you want to learn more, if you're not taking screen grabs or screen caps, you can learn more about Net Squared. The biggest group is here in the Bay Area in San Francisco, but there are groups in other parts of the country and also internationally. I just scrolled up, if you can see the list. It's got the continent of Africa centered, so you can go to many places in the world and you'll find a Net Squared group. Most of the larger ones are in North America and in the UK at the moment. And last, I have been working on an event with a bunch of other people in social change, and it's called Co-Liberate, and that is happening on October 6th and 13th. It is basically an unconference focused on Black and Brown entrepreneurs who are working for social justice. So I'm going to send something out in the newsletter, but also you'll start seeing it pop up on social, just to help spread the word. So I think that's it. With that said, I'm gonna pass it over to Erik, and he will introduce Strava and the team, and they'll dig in and we will learn everything. Okay, here we go.
Awesome. Well, first off, Regina, thank you so much for having us. We're really excited to be presenting here, and a huge thanks to Yudi and Sarah for for making this happen, for getting us hooked in. And yeah, we're just really excited to be presenting here. So once Haynes gets her screen up, we can kind of walk through how the presentation will go. There we are.
There.
All right, so first we'll do a quick round of intros, and then we can kind of jump into agenda and kind of get rolling. So I'm Erik Sunde, out here in Denver, and I'm a product manager for Strava Metro.
Hi, I'm Brian Rogers. I'm in San Francisco, and I'm engineering lead for Strava Metro.
And I'm Haynes Bunn. I'm the Senior Customer Success Spatial Engineer for Strava Metro, based in Hanover, New Hampshire.
Awesome. Yeah, if we want to go to the next slide. So just a bit of housekeeping, run through the agenda real quick. We'll talk a little bit about Strava, high-level overview of what Strava Metro is. Haynes will jump into equity and accessibility, and then we'll wrap up with a Q&A and breakout sessions. So first thing, what about Strava? I think we have some folks from Strava here, some people that have used Strava, maybe some of you have never heard about it. But we like to say that Strava is the home of your active life. Our mission is connecting athletes to what motivates them and help them find their personal best. But what that really means is we're letting people record their activities, share in their friends, kind of achievements, workouts, whether it's biking to work, training for a half marathon, kayaking, whatever it is. And if you want to jump to the next slide. So our users upload via smartphone, watch, fitness device, computer. We have about 4 billion activities, or more than 4 billion activities now, growing quicker and quicker by the year. 67 million members. And with that, we can maybe talk about Metro. First, I'd be remiss if we didn't say we are hiring. At Strava, we really, we support each other. We support each other's goals. Some people are marathoners, triathletes. Some people just love walking around the neighborhood. But if you like being active, Strava is a place for you. So we'll do a couple quick slides about Strava Metro. So Strava Metro is the result of all of those activities. So whether it's biking or walking, running, hiking, we are a massive data set about how people get from point A to point B. There are a number of planners, engineers, researchers who are working to make infrastructure better for these groups. And the data that we have can help them do that. So our mission is really to empower communities to make these active transportation decisions, to make sure that communities are accessible, efficient, and safe. So with that, I will let Haynes run through kind of the history of Strava Metro and how we got to where we are today.
Yeah, thanks, Erik. So we'll start with Metro 1.0, which started about 6 years ago when a few city planners at a couple of departments of transportation reached out to the team at Strava as they were working on their bike ped master plans. They were wondering if Strava could provide some data to help them back up their requests that they were making for some safer bike infrastructure. And so the engineers on the team at the time started looking into what could they provide to departments of transportation to help them make these decisions. So Metro 1.0 was a GIS data set, a geographic information systems data set that was delivered on a quarterly basis to these city planners. So some pros of that are it allows for really detailed and deep analysis into how infrastructure is currently being used. But we were also realizing that when trying to work with this data set, it requires a very high level of technical skill, both in GIS data and in relational databases. It takes time to set up that environment. So every time we would deliver data quarterly, it would require those groups to download all that data, load it into their systems to start working with it. So to get quick insights wasn't really feasible. Quick was maybe a couple of days or a week. And so we're also limited to the timeframes that we could build. So we were essentially building specific timeframes and delivering that data, but it didn't allow it to be very flexible if the end user wanted to do some additional filtering. And also, it was very time and resource intensive to build these data sets. So to put it in a little bit of perspective, when we would run 3 months worth of data for Texas, it would take over a week of processing for the data to finally be in a place that we could deliver it to the end user. So while it was working great for the users that we had, we knew that we wanted to be able to open up the access to this data to some larger groups. So the next piece was Metro 2.0, where we wanted to come up with a system where the users could access insights a little bit faster. So in addition to delivering quarterly data, we started delivering at the same time what we called data view, which allowed for some in-browser insights to be found pretty quickly. So it would take a top-level data set, and it would put this into a map that a user could see and click on and see, how many activities happened on a specific street. They could see how many activities happened in that time frame. And it was built at the same time that the GIS data set was built, so we didn't have to do any additional processing to get some quick insights into the hands of the folks who are using it. But we also still had a couple of drawbacks to this as well. So it still relied on building those data sets every quarter. So it meant it was still, time and resource and cost intensive to build them. It wasn't terribly scalable. We were sort of limited in the number of data sets that we could build every quarter, was how many partners we'd be able to support. And data view was static, so it was built in GeoJSON, and which meant that we only had the data, the static data that was loaded into there. There was, again, not any additional filtering that the end user could do to get the insights that they were looking for. So up next is Metro 3.0, and I'm going to hand it over to Brian to talk about this.
All right, thanks, Haynes. Yeah, so the product we've been working on for the last couple of years and are kind of in the process of rolling out. The goals were to make it insights more instantly accessible for non-technical staff, and we do this with like kind of a full web product, login based, no installs required, only optional, and we'll get to that more later. We wanted to allow for filtering of data, so it's a little more dynamic, a little more interactive. Scalable, so we can manage these with one-time setups for each partner, not doing quarterly deliveries as we had in the past. Making sure that querying is dynamic, and incorporating other resources of Strava in the main Strava product that some of you have used Strava in the past might recognize, but kind of repurposed for this more novel use case. So the dashboard is the first page, kind of the front door to the product. And this is a chart-based page, really good for surfacing insights to understand numbers and demographics of trips and people active in an area at a glance. So you can see the weekly and annual trends in active and leisure trips, as well as exceptional occurrences. In this case, this is the dashboard for Denver. You can kind of see the COVID bump, the blue line in 2020. Compared to the red line of 2019, but also a bit of an air quality slump coming into August because they also had flattening out after the original bump, but slumping a bit in trips moving into August, perhaps due to air quality, but can kind of see that the same people are still being active, maybe not active quite as often because the people line doesn't slump quite as much. You can also see demographic data. How the folks in a given area break down on the age and sort of visitor versus resident. You can also get a sense for how many are using Strava leisurely versus doing active travel. And just this is the sort of tool that is useful for partners to communicate high-level insights and trends encompassing their entire area to stakeholders. Next slide. So moving into our map visualizations, kind of the front door to the map is a heat map. People who've used Strava will recognize this. It's virtually the same data as you see in Strava's global heat map. It's essentially a heat map of the density of all the, oh, not quite done, thanks. Essentially a heat map of the density of all the millions of distinct GPS points from trips recorded and uploaded to Strava in the past 2 years. But you'll notice it's kind of fuzzy, like the lines are fuzzy. There's kind of readings that might be on ferries in the bay. But it's good for it's good to see high use areas and zoom in to see qualitative usage patterns at the street and neighborhood level. Next slide. Next, we have what we call our corridors feature. This highlights commonly shared subsections of trips over the past 2 years with relative volumes by time of day, day of week, and month of year. So now you can really get to see specific corridors that people are using on Strava, what time of the day they're using them, what days of the week they're using them, and what months of the year. So if you're familiar with San Francisco, you'll see the highlighted one is sort of Crissy Field moving towards the Embarcadero. You can also make out the Wiggle, Valencia Street corridor. You'll notice there's a slider there called corridor length, and it's in this screenshot it's set for a shorter length, which is good for highlighting active travel and commutes. Next slide. And if you slide that corridor slider out a little bit for a longer distance span, you'll get a better sense for leisure travel. And here you can see, if you're familiar with San Francisco, you can see the common Hawk Hill Loop. And you can also see the Polo Field track start to pop because a lot of people like to ride laps around that. Next slide. Our next feature is called Routes. This uses the same routing engine in Strava's Route Builder feature that Strava subscribers can use to build their own routes and learn where to be active at home and in unfamiliar places. For Metro, we use it to provide a comparison between the most direct and the most popular route based on historical Strava usage between an origin and a destination. So in this example, you can see that the direct route, that the red line is the popular route. So this is the way Strava users historically have preferred to go from point A to point B. You can see they prefer to go through the park more and maybe through the Wiggle, which is that zigzag line on the red line in the middle, even if it means going out of their way a bit to get into the park. And next slide. The last screen is called Streets. And this is really where you can get down to the nitty-gritty quantitative street block level data based on all the points in the heat map, but aligning them to a global base map, which is sort of a reference of where the actual streets are in the world. We use an open source one called OpenStreetMaps. And you can see, once you're here, you can see counts of trips or people. You can see average speeds. You can see demographic and time patterns. Using the filters in the left column, you can filter time period from full year down to single day level, active versus leisure travel and time of day. You can select these edges on an individual basis, which is shown in the screenshot. This is showing a single block of Folsom Street in the Mission and the counts on that block in August 2019. You also notice there's a download button. You can use this to download the sorts of data exports that we used to provide with Strava Enterprise, so our real power users and GIS professionals can get access to that same level of data that they used with our Enterprise product. But also have the ability to use the web product for higher level insights and for access to a broader type of person interested in this data. Next slide, please. So there's a demo. You can try it out, metro.strava.com/demo. This is Denver, sort of arbitrarily. Strava has an office there. Yeah, try it out. Be in touch. Let us know what you think. And I will pass it back to Haynes.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. So just a couple of things that we wanted to chat about in terms of accessibility and equity in transportation. So as we just talked about in previous iterations of the Metro data, there were several barriers to accessibility, technical skills, cost, and we were able to remove some of these barriers by implementing the Metro View, the Metro 3.0 version. But with recent events and the global demand for better active travel suddenly here, we announced last week that Strava Metro is now available for free for urban planners, departments of transportation, safe infrastructure advocates, folks who are directly working to make infrastructure safer and better in their communities. So it's something that we're really excited about, and we just announced that last week. And then also a note about equity. So Strava as a company has been focusing on becoming an anti-racist organization. And it's something that we are undertaking as an entire company that's affecting how we do work. You can see the statement from the company online, and I also recommend, if you haven't learned much about what anti-racism means, which it was a new term to me as I've been learning about it over the last couple of weeks and months. I definitely recommend learning more about it as well. And so part of becoming an anti-racist organization also means acknowledging when there's inherent bias in the data. And we understand that there are inherent biases in any user-generated data set. We've worked with organizations across the globe to develop ways of accounting for these biases with some universities, the CDC, and other folks who have been doing research into it. And while we're confident that the Strava Metro data is representative of larger active transportation trends, we know that we should acknowledge that not everyone who bikes is on Strava, and Strava Metro only includes the data from people who have public activities on Strava as well. And we're committed to correct this through improved representation. It's a constant pursuit that we are committed to improving racial equality wherever we can. So we wanted to start with in the Q&A and in the breakouts just to open up the conversation about how does transportation intersect with equity in society? What can we do to better serve the folks who are underserved? And how can we help those who are often left out of data? I've personally been doing a lot of reading about equity and race in transportation in the last couple of weeks, and learning about how it's a problem of multiple types of data collection, whether it's the census or reporting crashes or going to the hospital after a crash, that often it's underrepresenting Black, Indigenous, people of color in those data sets. And also, how can we be better community members, and what can we do to help? It's something that we're very much in a learning process right now, where we're trying to learn what it is that we need to help in this endeavor. So we'd just like to open up the conversation for the Q&A and the breakouts.
All right, great. I'm seeing, thank you so much. All right, there are some great questions coming through. Nat, I'm going to request that you unmute. So you should have that now. There we go.
Hi.
Hi, and do you wanna restate the question you put in chat?
Yeah, let me just make sure I can remember it. So I think the question I was asking is, I was curious if you have done any analysis of the kinds of street features, whether that's stuff tagged in OpenStreetMap or otherwise. It might explain, like, systematically some of the differences between the most popular routes and the most direct routes, because I think that that's such a fascinating thing that speaks to safety.
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about that, and then Haynes, if you have any kind of more specifics, feel free to dive into. At a high level, there's a lot of things that are intuitive that you would expect. When there is bike infrastructure of varying quality, you tend to see that be the case, where you see people diverting to take those routes. Another thing is just the topology. Is it are there hills? Big valleys that people have to go through, things like that. We've looked a little bit at OSM tags and things like that, but just due to the open source nature of OSM, At least so far, we've found that using them reliably across different geographies isn't terribly consistent. So we haven't really dug into that too much yet.
I think the feature like Strava's routes is interesting. Like if you know San Francisco, you won't at all be surprised by the example I showed where people preferred to go through the park and the Wiggle instead of directly from Richmond to downtown. But it really becomes more interesting where you say select a disadvantaged neighborhood where you might not see as much Strava traffic, and how do those people get from their neighborhood to a place of work or to another neighborhood? So I think there's really interesting insights that can be gleaned that aren't necessarily what someone who's very familiar with an area would expect.
And to add on to that, last year, about this time last year, I was looking at whether safe infrastructure affects women differently from men to see, did the patterns of female versus male athletes change in different ways if new and safer infrastructure is implemented. And I picked 4 or 5 in the US. And in some of them, there wasn't much of a difference, but there was one in Philadelphia where the bike lane was put in where it turns out mostly the male riders were riding on that street, and the female riders were riding about 2 blocks south of that on a much less car trafficked route. But once the bike lane was put in the intervening months after that, the women tended to change their patterns and were now biking in the protected bike lane. So while we haven't looked at things in a holistic manner, we've started looking at a couple of specific examples, and I definitely think it's something we want to continue looking into.
All right, thank you, Nat. Let's see, Yudi, who's with Strava. So I'm gonna unmute you or ask you to unmute. And yeah, ask your question.
This is not a planned question. I did not know how Metro product works. I was wondering, Brian, I think you mentioned active travel. What does that mean? How do we define it? Is that the same as a commute, or is there a broader definition?
It's similar to a commute. People who know the Strava product know that there is a commute flag. If you upload an activity, you can flag it as a commute. But we certainly don't expect that everyone commuting necessarily knows to use that and does use it consistently. So we have a programmatic way of sort of guessing is something a commute based on how long it is, how circuitous it is, basically how if it seems to be a point-to-point thing versus a loop or a return to the same start. I think we're always interested in refining this idea. I think in pandemic times, we're starting to see people who are doing active travel that might start and finish in the same place because they're going out and doing errands, not necessarily commuting to an office or a school at one end of the day and returning at the other end. We're trying to, I think moving forward, we're trying to move beyond just the notion of a point-to-point commute to try and understand where active travel might be happening in other circumstances.
All right, and it looks like we've got one more question here second to last question here in the chat. Cass from Carrie, and I'm asking Carrie to unmute. And hey, Carrie, how are you? Thank you for being here. And what's your question?
Yeah, hi everybody. I work at King County Metro, and so I was really delighted to see your first map up there of the Seattle region. And we're doing, we have a large focus on transportation equity in King County. We're doing a lot of research studies right now to better understand cost and non-cost barriers for people to mobility, and then trying to design some experiments to see what we can best do to improve people's mobility options. And one of the challenges in these studies is that it's very hard. You know, we can see how people are traveling on transit because they're tapping their transit cards, but it's very difficult to see what they're doing off transit. So I'm wondering if this tool might be able to help. And, you know, our focus is really around low-income communities, communities of color, and increasing not just their transit use, but their overall mobility.
Yeah, thanks for that question, Carrie. So that is one thing that in our previous data sets, we've looked at origins and destinations and not really knowing how people got from one point to another, but just general volumes. The current product, the MetroView product, is really focused on, you know, what are the trip volumes on any given street or trail, and then looking from there, you know, how that changes temporally. So yeah, I think especially when you're looking to see, you know, what are, you know, trip volumes around transit centers. I think that's an area where you can really see the data kind of help out. You know, with that being said, one of the things Haynes mentioned earlier is we certainly know that there are a lot of people that use a bike as their main form of transportation that aren't on Strava and, you know, likely won't ever be on Strava. But that's one thing we're always interested in, is figuring out how can we help account for those volumes. And so we know we're one piece of the puzzle. But we'd absolutely love to help out. If you want to throw an application our way, and we'll definitely get you set up.
All right. Awesome. And actually, yay, a couple of more questions rolled in. Rodrigo, or Rigo, as I saw them referring to you in the chat. What you got for us? What's your question?
Yeah, I'm curious, how has the inbound interest from potential partners changed since COVID? You know, are you seeing more? Do they have different goals, different kinds of people? I'm curious because, you know, when we worked together, we just had so much volume. It was like more than we could deal with. And that was like one of the, you know, motivations for building this product. So I'm curious how that has changed.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Digo. And for everybody who's not at Strava, Digo was the previous PM for Metro who helped get us moving towards web and kind of created this whole revolution for how we provide this data out. So huge thanks there. The volume has been, before our announcement last week, you know, we were getting, you know, called on the order of 50 or so applications a week. You know, people kind of heard through word of mouth, but pretty typical to what we'd seen previously. You know, mostly governments, some educational researchers, handful of advocates, and then always some curious Strava users. The announcement last week blew that number out of the water. And so we're swimming in a sea of applications right now, kind of figuring out how we can chip away at it bit by bit so we can kind of get ahead of it. We're seeing a lot more nonprofits. And I think one big thing that's happened is since we brought on the whole of the UK as a partner, we're now seeing all, you know, every possible town in the UK or council, whatever you call them, is they all now want to have data for their particular region. So that's been a huge bump in inbound. Surprisingly, not as many curious Strava users as we would have thought. I think a lot of that was just in how messaging went out. But yeah, it's been incredible to see the response, and it's been fun to be able to get people set up.
I think Regina somehow dropped off. I am trying to get in contact with her again, but I will, in the meantime, facilitate the next question. My name is Sarah. I also work at Strava. But so the next question is from Susanna. Do you have any partnership with any bike share program for deterring if a ride is from a private bike or bike share? I mean, because if we use both as trip counts, we might end up with over counting those trips. I realized I did not do this in the Regina style, and I'm actually going to unmute Susanna so she can have a conversation. And then I'm going to mute myself because clearly I am not meant for meetup hosting.
Thank you very much. So it's actually determined some typo over there. So what I was thinking is, because we do have plenty of data available from bike share programs like City Bike, or also Metro from Los Angeles and other bike share programs. So do you have any way in the Strava data to determine if those trips are from bike share or from private data? So this doesn't happen to kind of overlap them in the when counting trips or, you know, doing some studies with bikes.
Yeah, so we don't do any of that detecting at all. Historically, what we've done is really left that up to our partners to decide how they want to correlate different data sets. So whether it's with bike shares, bike counters, permanent or temporary count programs, we've worked with a number of different groups to help figure out the best ways to do that correlation. But we haven't done anything particular on the Metro data side to identify if something's on a bike share or not.
Okay, thank you.
I have now heard back from Regina. Her laptop literally just crashed in the middle of the Zoom, but she's on her way back. I think if there aren't any other questions, oh, there she is. Hi, Regina.
Oh my God, that was technical difficulties, but I'm back. All right. And that was fun and a little shocking. Learning in the age of COVID. All right. Now, I'm assuming Susanna's question got answered. I did. I literally missed it. All right, we're good to go. Okay. So first, also, just in case that happens again, I'm going to thank Adam. Right now, Adam Kutzinger is a member of SFTech4Good who offered to volunteer and help me out. So thank you so much, Adam. I appreciate it. I'm just really now terrified that I'm going to get punted again. So everybody thank Adam. And now we're going to go into breakout rooms. This is kind of an I'm improvising a little bit. I've done breakout rooms in Zoom many times before, but never for SFTech4Good. So, all right, what I'm going to do is I'm setting it up right now. You're going to be sorted into 3 rooms, and hopefully the Strava people will be distributed evenly. If not, I'm literally going to yank some Strava people out. And I know that, Erik, you've got to go poof at some point. Maybe now is a good time, unless you want to hang in the breakout rooms for a little bit. And yeah, all right, so I'm gonna do an automatic sorting. Don't worry, breakout rooms aren't recorded, so you can don't misbehave, but I'm saying, you know, you're off the record in a breakout room. And then ideally when we come back, yeah, you know, people can raise their hands and talk about some of the insights, or maybe even the Strava Metro team can take the lead on what was discussed. All right, here we go. Just making sure. Okay. Here we go.
Should I go join that?
Yeah, I'm actually going to move you to breakout 1.
Okay. Is there a reference for the prompts?
Yeah, well, I was hoping, I have to admit, I was hoping that you had your question. Everybody at Strava had the questions handy.
Okay, I will look for
maybe
them.
that was
I have them somewhere.
ambitious of me. All right, I'm going to move there we go. All right, and you should see a prompt that would take you in now.
Yeah. Thanks.
All right, I'll see you on the other side. All right, hi everyone. We are back from breakout rooms, And we only had 2 groups. And so I'm wondering, were there any high level insights or good points from either conversation that you want to share before we wrap? And that will just be a consensus thing. I don't have to make anyone speak if they don't want to. But just let me know. And how did the conversations go? All right, it looks like everybody is nice and quiet. So I'm going to assume that there was no earth-shattering information, and that's okay too. So with that said, I'm going to wrap this up. I mean, thanks so much to the Strava Metro team. This was a great experiment in trying to coordinate a panel with Q&A and a breakout session all together. I have been recording. I will try to put it up online. Of course, I want to get it to the Strava team and get things edited before. And so that's it. Feel free to go to the SFTech4Good.com website if you want to keep getting alerts about events. And the October event is already in motion. It's not the unconference, that's something different. And there will also be a speed networking event. I think I'm going to keep that in play too. So thank you all so very much. Again, Adam, thank you for stepping in at the last minute just to help out as a volunteer and be the doorman, so to speak, and just help me with all of this stuff. And okay, good night, everyone.
Bye, thank you.
Bye, thanks.